Hey, Tammy here with a takeaway for this week. And this week I wanted to tell you about this. I have a little garden shed, and I use it a lot through the spring and the summer and even into the fall. But in the winter, I don't hardly even go out there. It's just I don't do a lot of gardening in the winter. Anyway, so this winter, what happened was a squirrel moved in, or maybe a couple squirrels. I don't really know about the family dynamics of squirrels, but a squirrel or squirrels built a nest. And I have to back up so you can see. Like it was like this big around, this big old ball, right? They built it in my shed. So I hadn't gone in a little bit in the winter, and then I went in. I think this was the end of December, maybe January, and here's this big ball of paper, right? That they built this nest and they put it on a shelf in my little garden shed. And the paper that they used, they peeled it off of the sheetrock in my garden shed, right? So my garden shed had sheetrock up, but it had never been taped over, the seams, and it had never been textured and painted. It was just sheetrock, uh, nailed up there, whatever, and that was it. And so then with their little tiny teeth and their little tiny hands, they peeled and peeled this like sections of it till it was like sections seriously like over 3 feet um, this way deep and like the length of each of the sides of it, and they did all four walls, right? They just everywhere they could get to, they peeled. And so like one wall they didn't have anywhere to climb up because there wasn't a shelf on that wall, so all they did was run along the bottom of it, right? So as high as they could reach up with their little hands and teeth, so about a foot off the ground or off the floor, all the way the length of it, they had peeled all the paper off there. And then those shelves, each of those shelves, they were able to get up and peel this way, and then they must have hung upside down and peeled the other way or whatever, and they took off just these huge sections of paper to build this big ball nest that they had on the shelf, right? So then I wasn't sure what to do about it because did they have babies in there or whatever? So, I Google it. I'm trying to figure out what can I do. And everything was just like, oh, you can't touch them. You just leave them there until the babies leave. And they're going to leave like March or April, something like that. They were really unclear about when this was going to happen. So I did. I just left it as my shed was just a mess. There were little bits of paper strewn all over the floor that, they'd peeled and didn't quite make it to the nest or whatever. And this just is just gross in there. It's just awful. Anyway, so I'm just shut the door and leave it. And I didn't know how they were even getting in there or anything like that, right? And I'm just having to wait. Well, the waiting was over, right? April came to an end, and I went in there, and I'm just like, I didn't know. I'm hoping the babies are gone out of there, but I thought, well, I'll just try to take it down carefully and go put it in the woods. So I did. I took that thing, and it was pretty sturdy. It held together. I scooted it onto a board, and I took it into the woods, and I set it up in some shrubbery. I didn't want to put it on the ground because in case, well, my dog for one, right? So I put it up kind of high and just left it there. And then I come back to my disaster of a shed to deal with, right? And so as I was looking at my shed and all that was wrong with it and, what I needed to do to fix it, I had this thought about how I had accidentally made a very hospitable home for the squirrels, right? It was dry and relatively warm compared to outside, right? I provided them a lovely big shelf to build their big ball nest on, right? I provided them with all the paper they needed to make this nest. And so here, and then I also left them in quiet solitude, right? Because I wasn't going in there for so long. They had the place to themselves, so they weren't disturbed. I mean, I was like a really good hostess to these squirrels that I didn't even want in there. And it just made me think, okay, so now I don't want to be a good hostess to the squirrels. I want to make it where it's an inhospitable place for the squirrels. So what I'm in the middle of right now, I taped the sheetrock, and now I'm in the middle of texturing it. I've got one wall halfway done and some of the ceiling, and I got to do texture the whole thing, and I bought paint. So I'm going to texture paint over the top of that so that there's no paper for them to get to anymore, right? And I think I can't just leave it for so long. Oh, and also when I got everything out, so I after I got the squirrels out, I took everything out of there, and I saw they'd put holes. They had chewed holes through the wood floor, right? And they had two at opposite ends, so they had like an entrance and an exit, maybe. I don't know, but so I got that big gap foam stuff, and I sprayed it in there and filled the holes and went all along the base and just filled every little crack, and then taped all the sheetrock just to make sure. I'm just making sure that there's no way in, and though to keep them from doing it, I'm gonna have to make sure that I go in there a lot, even in the winter time. I don't know. I'll come up with some kind of winter projects or whatever. I think I can grow potatoes and maybe lettuces. I don't know. I'm thinking about that. But just to make sure that I'm going in there a lot so that I'm not leaving them undisturbed to do all the damage. And also to be more vigilant, right? To check, to see, are they digging holes through the floor and all that, right? So I'm just trying to take some steps to make it where I'm not a good hostess to squirrels anymore. Okay, so I'm done with that. I told him, listen. Oh, and while I was taking all that stuff out, one of the squirrels was up in the tree watching me work, right? He's just looking down at me and like going, dee, 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 making the little noise as I'm trying to pull everything, because, he obviously thinks that that's his space now. But no, it's not his space. He has all the woods. He can just go anywhere. This is my space, and so I want it nice for the things that I want in there, right? But I started thinking about that, like even with our spiritual life, right? Like, what are we making a hospitable home for, or an inhospitable home for? One time, this was a while ago, but we were worshiping at church, and we were singing a song that has the words, Jesus, I want more of you. And while we were singing it, I was really earnestly speaking that to God. I was telling him, yes, I want more of you. And you know what he said back to me? He said, then make more room. And I never had thought about it like that, right? That I needed to get some stuff out if I was going to make more room for him, right? And so that's kind of what I thought about with the squirrels too, right? I want to make it where I don't want the squirrels in there. And so what things don't I want in my own life that I need to get rid of? And what things do I want in my life that's going to make myself a more hospitable place for the Holy Spirit, right? I have a couple scriptures here. The first one, and this is from the Passion Translation, which I'm enjoying right now, just to get a different perspective, or maybe a feel to some of the scriptures that we've heard so much that maybe we start losing what it's really saying to us, So I'm kind of enjoying that one right now. So this one is 1 Corinthians 6:19. It says, "Have you forgotten that your body is now the sacred temple of the Spirit of holiness, who lives in you? You don't belong to yourself any longer, for the gift of God, the Holy Spirit, lives inside your sanctuary." That's just like, it's overwhelming if you really think about it and consider it, right? So what kind of home am I being for the Holy Spirit, right? How am I being a hospitable place for the Holy Spirit? And I think Paul talks to us about that in Philippians 4:8-9. He says, "And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all you learned and received from me and saw me doing. Then the God of peace will be with you." And I think I told you it's Philippians 4:8-9. And I love that. So the God of peace will be with you, right? It's what he says when you do these things. So this is kind of the furnishings, right? What we furnish our temple with, our being, right? He says our body is the temple of God. So what are we furnishing it with, and what do we not want to have in there, right? So what garbage do we need to take out of there, and what do we need to put in? And so I love that he kind of gives us a list of what the furniture should be, right? In the Old Testament, when Moses was building the tabernacle, God gave him strict instructions on what could be in the temple and how he wanted that tabernacle, and then it became the temple, how he wanted it to be, what things could be in there and what things could not be in there if he was going to dwell in there, right? Well, now he dwells in us. We are the temple, right? So there's the Holy Spirit of God dwelling in you. So what furniture do you have in there? What garbage needs to come out? What are you looking at, doing, taking part in that you shouldn't be, because the Holy Spirit is residing in you? And what things can you add? And what things can you think about? And what things should you be doing, because you're being a great host to the Holy Spirit. So that's my takeaway for today. I hope that it gives you something to think about and consider. And there's some great places. Hebrews, the book of Hebrews talks about that a lot, about the sanctuary that God made on earth, that the people built on earth, and then compares that to our bodies and the heavenly tabernacle and all that. It's just kind of interesting. So if you want to do some reading on that, that's a great place to study. I hope you have a great week. I look forward to talking to you again next week with a new takeaway. Thank you so much.